It's July 22nd, 2022. In the Armed Forces Retired Home located in Washington, D.C. My name is Jong-Woo Han. I am the president of Korean War Legacy Foundation, which has more than 1,500 of Korean War veterans interviewed, not just from the United States, but also other 21 countries that participate in the Korean War during the war. We are doing this to preserve your memory, first of all, because it's been already 70 years ago, more than, and we want to honor your service in this way. But also, we are going to make a curricular resources out of this interview so that teachers, history teachers and social studies teachers all over the world can use this interview, direct witness of your own experience as a Korean War veteran, when they talk about the Korean War in the classroom. It's my honor and pleasure to meet you, sir, and thank you for coming to share your story. Please introduce yourself. What is your name, sir?
My name is John Patrick Baker.
Patrick. What is your birthday?
May 15th, 1929.
1929?
Yeah.
So you are 93.
93, exactly.
Wow. You look very good.
Thank you.
So where were you born?
North Little Rock, Arkansas.
Oh. North Little Rock.
Arkansas.
Yeah. And tell me about your family background when you were growing up, your parents and your siblings.
My father was a businessman in North Little Rock in the oil distribution business.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only boy in the family. I have 3 sisters, and my mother was a school teacher until she married, and so that's about it.
You are the only son. And what did your mom teach?
She was an elementary school teacher.
So she teach everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
So you might have a very good education from your mom.
I do.
You are the only son of a mom who was teacher.
Yes, my English has turned out very good.
I think so. You're speaking very good English.
Thank you.
I think better than mine.
Oh, no. I hear every word you say, and it's grammatically correct.
I'm trying to be grammatically correct. That's the problem. I have to constantly think about grammar,
Sure you
know.
do.
So, what school did you go through there?
I went to the public schools in North Little Rock.
And what high school did you graduate and when?
North Little Rock High School in 1947.
So let me ask this question. You were growing up with your mom as a teacher, well educated. Did you learn anything about Korea either from your mom or from own school? Be honest. Did you learn anything about Korea? Did you know anything about Korea at the time?
No.
No?
No.
Definitely no?
No, in high school, no. Oh, I knew it was an Asian country, but I graduated in 47, and really the first time we learned about Korea was when it was invaded, when the South Koreans were invaded in 1950.
But now you are the Korean War veteran, right?
That's right.
You've been to Korea.
Oh, yeah.
When?
I went in November of 52.
And when did you come back?
In July of 53, that was the year the war ended. The time
Armistice was signed.
Armistice was signed. Yes, that's right.
Have you been back to Korea since then?
Yes.
When?
2001.
Why were you there? Who invited you back?
I went back because Jimmy Carter was the ex-president, had an organization called Habitat for Humanity.
Yes.
He had a build, that is, he was building houses in Asan.
Ah.
And so I went back as a volunteer to help build houses at Asan.
Wow. How did you know about that organization?
Well, I belonged to it. I contributed money to Habitat for Humanity. And I have here a newspaper article that I was interviewed when I went back. And so you can get that.
How many houses did you build at the time there?
Oh, well, there were, I think, a couple of thousand. I don't know.
What?
I worked on about 4, something like that.
Did you know Jimmy Carter, former president, in person or personally?
No, I didn't know him personally.
But I really have a high respect, one of the highest respect for him as a president of the United States.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
I do too. He was a very good president, I thought. Yes.
So, you didn't learn anything about Korea, even though you got really well educated, especially by your mom, and you became Korean War veteran and you went back to Korea in 2001. You have a great positions to give us very comparative picture of Korea you saw in 1952 to 53 and then 2001. Please give us detailed description of the changes that made.
May I refer to this thing here, this newspaper article? Would you get that from me, please? This is an article that the local reporter for the local Asan newspaper interviewed me, and it tells my impressions of Korea in 1952 as compared to 2001. And it was like dark and daylight. I mean, a wonderful transition from the Korea I knew in 1952 to the Korea I saw in 2001.
Give me the detail. What's in that article?
Well,
what did
for
you say?
instance, across the Han River, there was just one Hanggang Tadi, just one bridge in 1952, and it had been damaged by shell fire. And in 2001, there were several bridges across the Han River. And of course, the roads were all paved, and there were dirt roads or gravel roads mostly when I was there, and many of them were damaged by shells.
So then you can bring it down. You can put it down.
Put it down.
And so you just told us that there was only one bridge in 1952, but when you went back to Korea in 2001, how many bridges did you count?
Well, I didn't count them, but I could see them on the river. Yes.
What did you think about that?
Oh, well, I thought that was a wonderful transition from wartime to a very prosperous economy.
Did you ever imagine that Korea would become like that when you left Korea in 1953? Did you imagine?
Yeah.
Did you imagine that Korea would become like this 2001 you saw?
Well, I think that's why we were there, so that they could do that. Yeah.
But my question is, did you imagine that Korea would change like that when you left Korea in 1953?
No.
Why not?
Well, I didn't know whether we were going to win the war or not. we were there trying to win the war so that they could, in a democratic society, prosper. But it was uncertain at that time. We were there to do that.
What about Seoul City you saw in 1952 and 2001? Can you give us real, very detailed description? How was building at the time, but now, and so on, please?
Well, to me, there was a lot of damage. Well, first of all, we came in through the port of Incheon, and it was blown completely up. There were no roofs on houses, and it devastated the whole town of Incheon. Then we went to Yeongdeung-po, and which is across the river from Seoul.
Yeah.
And we didn't stay much in Seoul. We were encamped at Yeongdeung-po, and then we crossed the Honggang-tari and went to North Korea to occupy a portion of the front.
And how was it at the time, and compare it with the 2001, please?
Well, it was many of the houses had been blown up, and the roads were not modern roads. But when I went back in 2001, it was just like going to New York City.
Give me more. What did you see in 2001 in Seoul? What did you see?
I saw a very. We went through Seoul.
Yep.
In a convoy with all of our equipment and crossed the river, and I didn't. It didn't make much of an impression on me at the time because it was a wartime situation and much damage and very primitive in a way. Yeah.
But when you went back to Korea 2001, it was completely changed.
Like New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's much cleaner and bigger than New York City, to be honest.
I bet it. I expect it is. Yeah.
Seoul metropolitan city is one of the 10 biggest metropolitan city in the world.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I can believe that. Now when I went back in 2001, we landed at the airport, and then they bused us to Asan, and then right back and in the airport. Now I'll give you an incident that happened in 2001. I had some time in the Seoul airport to use before my plane would take off. So I went to the local bus stop and asked the man, are you on a tour? Do you do a tour around Seoul? Yeah, we do a short tour, maybe a couple of hours. I'll take it. So I got on that bus, and he recognized me as an old fella. So he said, were you here in the war? I said, yes, I was a soldier in the war. He turned to his audience, his passengers, and he said, I know he must have told them that this was an American who has come back here after having served in the war, and they applauded me, and it made me feel very, very, very welcome and appreciated.
Yep. So let's go back to around the time that you joined the military. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
No, I was drafted.
When?
No, I was a schoolboy. I was in June of '50 when South Korea was invaded.
Yeah.
I was a student, a senior in college. I wanted to be a school teacher. So, but they needed many troops because at that time the Chinese had entered the war, and they needed many troops in America to go over there and serve. So I was drafted. So I'm not a military veteran. I'm a veteran, but I am not a career military man.
Right.
Yes.
So you were drafted in Arkansas?
Yes.
Yes. And where did you get the basic military training?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Fort Sill.
That's the artillery training center.
So were you the artilleryman?
Yes.
Yeah. And from when did you leave for Korea? Where?
From San Francisco.
When was it?
It was in November of '52.
Were you afraid at the time to be in the war?
Well, no, I wasn't afraid, but I didn't know what to expect. I had confidence in our military power, and I thought we could make it okay. Yeah.
So how long did it take to cross the Pacific Ocean from
11
San Francisco?
days.
Huh?
11 days.
That's it?
Yeah.
How was the journey? Was not pleasant, right?
Well, it was on a troop ship. It wasn't by plane. It was a troop ship, and there were 2,500 soldiers on the troop ship, and all of us were seasick.
Because you are from Arkansas. You didn't have a water there, right?
That's right. I wasn't used to the water, and of course we all got seasick and over the side, and it was.
Did you throw up?
Yeah.
Must be very smelly around you.
Oh, it was, yeah, because you'd get over the side and there'd be soldiers all along the side of the rail, and the wind would blow, and you'd get spattered from somebody else.
Okay, let's stop talking about that.
Yeah, you could cut that.
And then, when did you arrive? Where in Korea?
What?
When did you arrive in Korea? Where?
We arrived in Korea in that same month, November of '52, after 11 days at sea.
Where? Was
Incheon.
it Incheon? So, tell me about the Incheon you saw for the first time. You didn't know anything about Korea much.
Yeah.
And you were there in 2001. You arrived in Incheon, right?
No, not 2000. I arrived in Incheon in November of '52.
But also, you went back to Korea in 2001.
Yes.
And you arrived in Incheon, right?
Oh no, we arrived at the airport in
Gimpo?
in Seoul.
So,
In '51, as a soldier, I was on a troop ship. But when I went with Jimmy Carter's outfit, I went by plane and
Right.
landed in Seoul.
So you mean landed in Gimpo Airport?
Gimpo.
Not Incheon.
That's right.
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 So please describe the Incheon you saw for the first time in 1952. How was it?
There was no city. I mean, I couldn't even see from the ship. You could see the houses without roofs and much destruction, and it was a terrible scene in Incheon because it had been bombarded and shelled before we got there. Many months before.
Yeah, Incheon landing in September of 15th of 1950, it was all bombarded.
Oh, yeah.
So from Incheon, where did you go?
Yeongdeung-po,
And then
Chowan,
you went to Cheolwon.
yeah, Chowan, Kimhwa, Pyongyang. That was the Iron Triangle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was your unit at the time?
It was the 235th Field Artillery Observation Battalion.
Observation Battalion?
Yes.
And belonged to What division?
Well, we were the Ninth Corps, in the Ninth Corps, and it was the Eighth Army. This is the Eighth Army.
Yep. And what was your rank at the time?
Private.
Private. And your specialty, the MOS, was?
They knew I was a college graduate, so I was keeping records for 2 batteries of our battalion. You have to know every morning how many troops you have, the strength of your unit, and so I did a lot of record keeping.
What kind of record?
Well, in the American Army at that time, every unit had what was called a morning report. A morning report. And in that morning report, you had to show how many soldiers were present for duty, how many were sick, how many were killed in action, wounded in action, sick and in the hospital. It was a numerical thing that you kept so that the commanding officer would know what the strength was. So that I was a record keeper.
So you were in the rear area?
No, I was there in a tent right there with the 2 batteries of artillery.
Wow. In triangle, iron triangle.
Iron triangle.
And that was Cheolwon, Geumhwa, and Pyeonggang.
That's right.
Yeah. Tell me about what did you see there? How intensive the battle was and so on. Please give us detail.
Well, okay. Well, if there were 2 adjectives that I would describe my experience in Korea,
Good.
it would be cold and loud, because the guns were going off all around me, not coming into me, but going off all around. And at nighttime, it hardly got dark because of the flash of the guns. And on May Day, I think it was May Day, I think that's a communist holiday, it almost never got dark because of the flash of the guns.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
Never dark.
They would have me, I was just a private, and they would have me on guard duty, and at nighttime, it's almost like daylight.
Wow. Were there any dangerous moment that you could be killed?
No, not from incoming.
So
I don't hear very well now today because of the loudness of the guns.
So because you belong to the artillery, so that the whole position is rear, not far front, right?
Well, I mean, I think our 105s would shoot 7 miles. The 155s would shoot 12 miles, and the long toms would shoot 20 miles maybe. So that was it, yeah.
Got it. But still, that's the Iron Triangle, one of the most severe battleground during the Korean War.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something that you may not know. There were more American artillery shells fired on the Korean Peninsula in 3 years than there were in all of World War II.
You're not kidding me.
Check that out.
You're not kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you.
Can you repeat that?
Okay. It was an artillery war at the time I got there anyway, in 1952, because the line was straight across the peninsula. I mean, not straight, but I mean, tried to follow the 38th parallel.
Yeah.
And 130 miles, I think it was, and there were 60 American artillery battalions along that line. There were only 3 of us, 3 observation battalions. And so what I'm telling you is that it was an artillery war at the time I got there. Now, at the beginning of the war, it was an invasive war down the Pusan perimeter, and then after that, MacArthur went around with his invasion from
Incheon Landing.
Incheon Landing, and then he didn't obey Truman, and he went up to the Yalu, and the Chinese were concerned, and here they came in great numbers and pushed back down, took Seoul again, and then Ridgway, General Ridgway, pushed back up along that 38th parallel. It was like that, but anyway, then from that time on, which I think was around 1951 late, it was an artillery war.
Yeah.
Bang, 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 with some infantry activity, but limited, to take Hill 41 or Hill 95, and so that was the kind of war it was. That's the kind of war it was when I got there. Big artillery exchanges and very limited infantry work. And so, yes, the statistics are that American artillery fired more rounds in that 3-year time than it did in all of World War II, all over the world. Now, you check that out and verify it, but that's my understanding. And so it was an artillery war, yeah, at that time, yeah.
Where did you get that statistics?
From Army records.
I trust you. That tells us how severe that battle was.
Yeah.
But your unit was different from regular artillery
Exactly.
because it's an observation. Tell us about what observation battalion did
Okay.
or does.
The main object of an observation battalion is to be the ears and eyes of the artillery. Because we had to have the guns had to have some kind of coordinates to aim at. And so we had what were called forward observers.
Right.
Now, forward observers would get in a bunker ahead of the infantry, and there'd be one here and one here, and then they would, by triangulation, figure out the coordinates of a gun.
Right.
And how do they know that gun is there? By flash and sound. And we had equipment and radar, and we had equipment that could tell pretty much where that gun is by looking at it or hearing with instruments. So that was flash and sound and radar were the things that were used. Now, I was not in that. That was our battalion. But as I say, I was keeping the records, and I knew who had the clap because I kept the records, and I knew all of that, yeah.
So that observation mission is very dangerous because you have to work
Yes.
with forward observers who are far front in the battle line, and then you get all this information and then decide where to target it and how you target it.
We had what was called an information van that would get this information from the forward observers, and then they would transmit it to the firing batteries.
Yeah.
And tell them what kind of situation it was, whether there was an artillery unit over there or whether it was an infantry unit. And also, there were searchlights along the border. Mm-hmm. So that was, and there were only 3. Each observation battalion had about 600 people. And there were only 3 of those along that 130-mile front, and we're giving information to the firing batteries. So that's what they did. But I was not a forward observer. I wasn't up in that bunker with a periscope trying to figure out where that gun went off over there.
Right.
No, that I was not trained in that.
But still, you are in a position to know what's going on in overall picture. How many been killed? How many are there? How many are in hospital, and so on.
Exactly.
So every day you check the number, and when you saw that there are numbers of casualties and the killed in action, what were you thinking?
What
Were you thinking when you saw those number of casualties and so on? How dramatically changed every day?
Yeah. Well, during the time I was there, we had 6 people killed in action from those bunkers out front.
You mean in the artillery unit, right? In the artillery unit,
Yes.
not the 6 of them were belonging to the artillery. Not in the front line as a rifleman.
That's right. They were not infantry. They were sometimes ahead of the infantry.
Right.
Yeah.
6 of them you saw.
Yeah, I got the record here for that. Yeah.
Ah,
You want it? It's
yeah.
here.
What is it that you are holding?
Well, this is a list of those fellas in our battalion who were killed in action in the time that I was there.
Can you explain it? What you are look at it and read it, or can you explain what you are looking at?
Here is this fella's name was Barth, and he was in Sea Battery, and said killed in action. Barrio, Musselman, Robertson, Shirley. It's the names of the fellows who were killed in action. And I don't know how many were wounded. I can't tell you that, but I do know that during the time that I was there in November of '52 to July of '53, there were 6 fellows in our unit who were killed in action. And the Army keeps very good records, and how many shells were fired, and when, and where, and how many were killed in action, and how many were wounded, and so forth. And that was what I did. Morning reports, they call it. Every morning you knew what the strength of that outfit were and where every soldier was. Yeah.
You know that there will be a dedication of Wall of Remembrance on July 27 in the National Mall, in the Korean War Memorial Park.
Yeah, I'm going to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be there too, but see, those names will be there in the
Yes.
Wall of Remembrance.
They will, yes.
After a long time, finally, we're going to have a Wall of Remembrance, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you will be able to
I'm going.
see their names.
That's why I have this list. I'm going down there, and I'm going to look for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that nice? Finally?
Well, yeah. I would. We have lots of war memorial monuments along that thing. I wish we would give some emphasis to keeping the peace. Instead, yeah, but anyway,
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah.
We need to put much more focus on how we're going to maintain the peace.
Yeah, we do.
After all those sacrifices been made, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How was life? Where did you sleep? What did you eat? Were there any Korean busboy or any Korean people that you worked together at the time? Tell us about the life.
Yes, the Koreans were very supportive, and of course they had many soldiers killed too, and then in the civilians we had much support. Korean, I forgot what they call them.
Katyusha?
Katyusha. Well, they were soldiers, I think. But then we had civilians that would come in our tents, they would see that we had a stove kept going. I don't, and we could hire them to wash our clothes, and they were right up there with us, young men and boys even, yeah. So, and I made friends with a Korean fella who was helping us. Yeah.
Any other episode, dangerous moment that you could have been killed, or any other episode that you still remember or still bother you?
Well, we were always apprehensive about breakthroughs because they had many, many more soldiers than we did, the Chinese.
Yeah.
But, and at night, I had to do guard duty 4 hours, walking the perimeter of our area, and you never knew when some patrol from North Korea would come down, and so that was apprehensive, I guess, when you're out there by yourself patrolling a particular area, to let people in our organization know if there were people infiltrating. That was apprehensive. And then when we first got there, we were a raw unit and just come up to the front, and somehow we were on the cold ground, and we had a tent, but we were on the frozen ground, and they had what was called a red alert. We didn't even know what it was, but they said there's a red alert. Well, that was some indication that some breakthrough was taking place. Mm-hmm. And so they had got us out of the warmth of the and out there, but nothing happened, and that was really the most apprehensive time that I had. Mm-hmm. But I was lucky. I was in a situation where I was not exposed to incoming fire.
Yeah.
I was right there at outgoing fire. We had superior artillery to theirs. They had supply line difficulties. Our air was completely superiority, and they could keep they could keep the North Koreans from marshaling their forces for a big offensive. They could drop bombs on them, and also artillery would keep them from marshaling their forces. And the Iron Triangle was the main invasion route, and we had big guns all around that to keep them from organizing their troops over there and making a big offensive.
Right. So what do you think is the legacy of your service as Korean War veteran?
Well, I think Korea probably was a good example of Americans helping to keep communism from expanding. It was the most successful one, I think. We didn't do very much in Vietnam in success stories, but in Korea it has. Now I think it's the fourth biggest economy in the world, or one up there tops anyway. And so I don't regret at all the time I spent as a soldier in Korea. Yeah.
I think that's a very important point for you to make, because still South Korea is strongest ally to the United States, and China is challenging American hegemony. So that kind of the line of conflict between U.S. and China completely dissect the Korean Peninsula, South, North Korea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Korea has never really been finished and shouldn't be forgotten, but it's been known as a forgotten war. Why?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Well, I think it's because it occurred after World War II. And the people of the United States were tired of war. And they weren't entirely in favor. It wasn't a popular war at that time, but it's turned out to be successful, I think. And it was forgotten because people just were tired of war, and because of from 1941 to 45, and I think that's it. And when we came back as soldiers, people didn't make a big to-do about it. Nowadays, they thank you for your service, thank you for your service. But back then, we just came back and melted back into the populace. Yeah, there was no big to-do about our having served.
Some of veterans that I had interviewed, they were asked, where have you been after 2 or 1 years from their home? People here
Yes.
asking them, where have you been?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And then I think also we just, the young people, I was young, of course, and we just expected that, well, we were going to be drafted and do something, and so it wasn't a big surprise to have to serve.
Any other story that you missed to share with me today about your service as Korean War veteran there?
No, not really, I don't think. Oh, I was married at the time.
Really?
Yeah, well, I was drafted in August, and when I came back home on a pre-embarkation leave to go to Korea, I married, and so I was away from my wife for that time.
That
and,
must have been hard for you, and for your wife too.
Well, we were young then, it's okay. Yeah, I mean...
Did you write letters to her often?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
What did you write?
I said, well, I'm counting the days to come home.
See? What did she write to you?
Oh, well, the usual romantic things like I miss you, and but I've benefited greatly from my service in Korea in this regard. I had the GI Bill when I came back here, and that paid my way to law school.
Oh.
Yeah.
So did you go to law school?
Yeah.
What school?
Well, I went first to the University of Arkansas.
Obviously.
At law school, and then I got a Master of Laws from Georgetown here, University.
Very good.
Yes.
So what did you do? Did you practice the law?
In Little Rock for about 1.5 years, and then
As an attorney or
yeah.
publicly?
Yeah, as a lawyer, yeah, in the courts. But then I went to work for a senator from Arkansas,
Who?
John L. McClellan. Okay, well, I worked for him for 4 years up here in the Senate. And then I transferred over to the House of Representatives. And I worked there 18 years.
For whom?
Wilbur Mills.
From Arkansas?
Huh?
From Arkansas?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And so I worked on the Hill for 22 2 years.
So you know what's going on in the Hill.
I do, yeah. And I work for Democrats. And so then I retired, and this is going to surprise you, I think.
What is it?
I went to seminary. Do you know what a seminary
Yeah.
is? All right, I went to seminary.
What seminary?
It's the Episcopal Seminary across the river in Alexandria. It's
Yeah.
called the Virginia Seminary.
Yeah.
And I graduated from there. But I've always been a Methodist. Do you know what a Methodist is?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Well, I was a Methodist minister then for 7 years down here at 16th and Peace Streets at Foundry Methodist Church.
Wow.
And then after that, I retired again. I'm 93 now, and so I retired and then did volunteer work with hospice. Do you know hospice?
Yeah.
And then I also volunteered at Mount Vernon,
Yep.
George Washington's home,
Yeah.
as a volunteer. And then finally, in 2017, I came here as a retiree. And in that time also, I got a divorce after 52 years of marriage.
Oh.
I wrote committee reports and did research. So that's what I did.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you for your service as Korean War veteran. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome.